Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. It has been a privilege for us to host Tim again. Personally, I believe collaborative practices such as pair programming, mob programming, and swarming lead a team towards self-organization. There has been a lot of literature around pairing and mobbing, but around swarming, I find a little difficult to find something which is based on the detailed experience. So who better than Tim will explain it any better. So without any further ado, I will move it to Tim for further discussion.
All right. Well, here we are, right? And we're all together to take in some new information. So it seems like all together now is a reasonable title for us to use. I'm happy to be able to present to you again. It's been some time. We've been trying to get it put together, and one thing or another has gotten in the way, usually on my end. So thank you for your patience and perseverance and forbearance, and for the invitation to come back again. Well, we'll go ahead and move right into the materials, if that's okay. So a typical thing we hear from managers, and here I'll be the manager, there we go. It's just not efficient to have two or more people doing the job of one person. And I imagine some of you have heard this stated once or twice in the past. Well, okay, I appreciate the thought, but then we come up with this other idea. Why are we so sure that the job being done was a one-person job? What qualified it as a one-person job? Well, the answer to this becomes pretty obvious and easy to figure out. It's a one-person job because, you know, because I said so. Right? So a lot of people are thinking, well, you know, it's not efficient to have two people working together, or three or four. Well, how efficient is it having one person working? Oh, well, we never get anything done on time. It's a difficult thing to try to keep our software, you know, working and also make progress, and everything takes longer than it should, and things are never done to our quality requirements and specifications. Well, I think that's probably short-sighted, and it's one of those things that people never question, right? If I assigned it to one person, it must be a one-person job. Statement from authority must be true. Well, maybe it's not true. So let's think that through for a minute. If, in reality, things are not getting done quickly and well and on time when they're assigned to one person, maybe it's not that you have the wrong people. Maybe it was never a one-person job, right? So perhaps a lot of the work that we're doing, we're shorting the work. Can you imagine if you had a 5-person job, you had to fell a giant tree in a forest, and it really takes 5 people to do it well, and you sent one person, what would you expect? Well, it wouldn't be done quickly. It wouldn't be done well. It probably wouldn't be to standard. We probably wouldn't like the result all that much. It's probably not good enough. Well, what if you send 5 people to do a 5-person job then? What happens then? Well, then the job gets done well, quickly, and on time. So this is a basis for the idea of the jobs to brains ratio, and a lot of people never question it, right? Well, we can question that, and we can move forward with that, and we can find many ways for multiple people to work together and to do it efficiently and effectively, where one person would have been inefficient, but highly utilized. So I don't expect you to read all of this text that I have up on the screen. There's just too much of it. But I did highlight a little piece about diversity, and talking about having people who are different working on teams and arguing and deliberating. This is one of my favorite articles. And in the article, the author says, despite the evidence about their results, homogeneous teams just feel more effective. People believe that diverse teams bring greater conflict than they actually do. And this is true as well. When you bring other people in, people get upset about that. It's like, well, I have to work with a bunch of people. I'm going to have to explain what I'm doing. I can't just do what I want. And it's like, yes, that's true. That's why it works. Right? We can have ideas that are half-formed. It might not even be a good idea. But when we share those ideas with people who don't have exactly the same thoughts as we have, when we share those ideas, then they can often call out flaws, errors in thinking. Or it may be that what we're thinking about is a good idea in general, but not in this specific case, that the rules change because this work is different. So a lot of people dread going into groups of any sort for fear that they'll be contradicted. But that's exactly why groups work. So we should be embracing that instead of avoiding that. This is also seen by managers sometimes as an inefficiency, right? So I put 4 people on a team. The one guy would have spit this thing out in about 3 hours, but the team is still working on it after 5. Look how inefficient it is. It's like, yes, that one guy would have made a horrible mistake in 2 hours and turned the code over, and it would be returned 3 times from testing and refused by the customer. But maybe you could have squeaked it through. Maybe it would have been okay. But the team has realized that not only is it not a good implementation, it's even not a good story. And we maybe need to take back to the product owners or product managers or customers for rethinking. So it is the deeper, better thinking that is the efficiency in teams. And I know that sounds really funny to people, but it's still true. And they find that the more diversity you have on your teams, the better they perform, the better decisions they make. But it doesn't feel as easy. It doesn't feel as smooth because you have multiple people. I don't want people questioning my ideas. Well, that's great. So what you mean is you want to continue making mistakes without any friction whatsoever, right? When people question your ideas, then you come up with better ideas together. So this leads us, though, to an interesting situation. It's like, why are we not all solo programmers? What's the advantage of working in groups? So I have a little picture I've taken from a model railroad advertisement. They're selling cardboard cutouts that you put into your model railroad. But I labeled it. And here's what it looks like. And some of these signs are tiny, and I'm sure the screen is a little blurry. But there is a diner here, and somebody who works there really knows how to cook. They can cook well and fast and with many ingredients and produce many dishes. There's a market here where somebody knows how to stock and keep things fresh and sell them and collect taxes and all those things. There's a hotel in the back. At the hotel, there are people who know how to practice hospitality and to clean the rooms and keep them up, and to provide, tickets to local events and a concierge and all the wonderful things that hotels do, including security. Down here, there's a bank. The bank knows how to hold on to money, how to make loans, how to collect on loans, all the many things that banks do. There's a sporting goods store who can probably tell you the best catcher's mitt that you could buy for your baseball team. I know you don't play baseball much, but the best catcher's mitt for your baseball team for under $25, which, by the way, is probably not the best one. And they could tell you that if you go up another $10, you could get a much better one because they know their products, right? So in this team, this is like a team. A village is a team. We form up these villages so that people are able to specialize a bit and have specialties. Not everyone has to do everything. So this comes up with this interesting problematic statement that you see at the top. If your town has a great baker, you don't need a bread recipe, right? And a lot of organizations form to do things that it would be hard for people to do alone and would not allow people to have specialties and clear knowledge about every aspect of the application. This way that people can dig in. So it's very helpful. So what do you do this with teams? What happens when you need the bank, the hotel, and the market to work together to get something to happen in the community? Should you divide up the work and have them work in isolation, or should they get together and have some kind of a committee that works together and a work group that goes out and does the community work? Well, in a lot of organizations, we have so enshrined the idea of specialization that we dread the idea of having people work together. The database expert and the user experience expert, they shouldn't have to work together. They should be able to take their own pieces and go work on their own, right? All we have to do is do a really great job of coming up with a total design from beginning to end so that we can slice out the pieces and time slice those so each person will be done with their piece at exactly the right time, done exactly to the right standard, and then they can work alone. You think, wow, that's a lot of work. What if we just threw them all in a room and let them do the thing? Don't you think it would be like 10 times faster? Well, what about specialization? Where would we get our efficiency? Well, the efficiency is working together. So sometimes it's good to have your own specialties, but also it's good to be able to work with people who have the other specialties needed to get a job done. Right? None of these one organizations could be a town by itself. You couldn't have a town based on one hotel, because people have to eat. People have to exchange money, right? If you're going to cook food, you have to be able to acquire the food, so you need somebody to sell it. So these things together can make a town, even though people have specialties. So on balance, we have to think about what is the right degree of having deep specialty and the right degree of having the necessary behavioral skills for people to work together, right? And in this balance is the secret to being truly efficient and getting things done well, on time, quickly, to quality standards in a way that the customer wants. It isn't about dividing people up and having them work harder. It's about bringing their ideas together in a more efficient way. So, specialization has a natural form, and it comes up organically sometimes. And so I'll bring up a very famous picture you all have recognized and seen before. But I'm going to tell a slightly different story. So, of course, these are the blind priest and the elephant, and they encountered an elephant for the first time. They walk up. Each person gets an impression of what an elephant's like. And the old story is that they argued with each other and fought. And in our case, we're not going to do that. They're going to be a team. So I'm modifying the story somewhat. So as they start working on this elephant and figuring it out, they find, start getting a real handle on things. So over here, wow, the speech bubble didn't appear. There's a fellow named Harold. He's at the tail of the elephant, and he's feeling the tail. Oh, I see. This is a frayed rope. That's what we're dealing with here. It's long, it's tubular. There's a nice tassel on the end. Could use a wash, but it's in pretty good shape. That's an elephant. Okay, says the boss. That's great. Hey, there's a guy at the front. I have a long tubular part with a flare at the end. And the manager says, talk to Harold. He's the expert on long tubular parts. He's encountered one before. Assuming, of course, that all long tubular parts must be the same. You need a specialist on long tubular parts. I don't know how much Harold knows about the trunk of an elephant. He's only studied the tail. But apparently, it sounds like it's close enough. So we move on. Then this guy down here on the ground. Hey, Harold, I'm going to need you to take a look at this. I've got a long tubular part. It happens to be a leg. This must be Harold's job. Wow, poor Harold. I don't want to be Harold. There is a convenience in dividing a burden into one brain-sized chunks. But there's also a price to that. What if Harold doesn't really understand all of these things that now have been thrown on him because he once knew about one of them, right? There's a burden in being the one person who has to know it all. And sometimes organization brings in a person to be the architect, and the architect's job is to know the stack, the application, the domain, the operating system, the web architecture, the everything, and all the right libraries to use and all the right standards to follow. Poor Harold the architect. It wasn't his fault. He grew into it. He didn't try to do this. It wasn't his choice. But by being good at one thing, he's now placed in a position to have to be good at them all. Well, this is not how we would do swarming. This is not our choice. There is also an extreme risk. What happens if Harold quits and he's the only one who knows how all the tubular parts work? Right? Poor Harold. He might win a lottery and become a millionaire. He might have his side business suddenly go rich. He might become sick. He might decide to take a job in another country just to get away from elephants. And then the team is sunk. So there's a convenience. There is a perceived efficiency. There is a machine-like nature of it. There's a town-like division of labor. But somehow it seems burdensome. It has to be planned really exquisitely, and there's a real risk to it. So we tend to not do this at all. We don't like to have one person who... It's better to have one person who knows it all than nobody who knows it all. But ideally, we would know it all together. So that's an important thought about how we work. Next piece is, what if you outsourced all of the learning and risk to one of your team members? So we'll all just keep working. Srikant will do all the learning for us, and he'll come back and teach us, in addition to doing his regular work. Well, maybe that's not the way this works. Maybe it's not ideal. So we looked at things like efficiency. We talk about flow efficiency, and this is a value stream map done properly in lean manufacturing. And this is an example. It's oversimplified. It would be much, much larger. And you'll see that there are different pieces that are shown. Here's the customer wants things. They send orders to supplier. The supplier sends things back to the customer. How does it go from the supplier to the customer? Well, there's a series of processes, right? And each process, you'll notice, has some cycle time. This one takes 300 seconds to perform, right? And according to this, when the supplier dumps the tickets on them, this person has an average backlog of about 1,783 pieces to work on. Orders. It takes him about 300 seconds to do each one. He puts it into a pile. This pile gets 1,200 items stacked up, waiting for the next process in the assembly line. And this person takes 45 seconds to do the work. So of course it's going to be a big buffer. They pass it on to this person, takes 300 seconds. The stack never gets very big between them. 700 compared to the others. It's not that bad. And it passes on to the next process. It takes 300 seconds. So there's a big stack of these in front of shipping, who sends it to the customer monthly. And you get this flow of things, how long things take. Notice, though, and there's some nice things about this, and there's some numbers underneath. It takes 6 days to receive the order. We work for 300 seconds. It takes 4 days for it to reach the next station, where it takes 45 seconds. In a day, it goes to the next station, which takes 240 seconds on average, or something like that. And then it takes 3 days to be piled up, waiting for it to be shipped. So the production lead time is 14 days total time, and the processing time is about 585 seconds. So the process efficiency is the time spent adding value over the total time. Is this an efficient process? Well, it's seconds over days. Doesn't feel very efficient. Well, you got to compare it with other similar processes, right? Well, how could you make this faster? What happens if process C can go twice as fast? Will that double our output? If anybody thinks that cutting 240 seconds down to 120 seconds will knock these 14 days down by more than 120 seconds, then I'd like you to revisit your math background, maybe take some remedial math courses. No, if this person, process C, were twice as fast, it would make no difference at all, practically, some tiny percentage. What if we got process A and made them work twice as hard? That's 150 seconds. That's not going to matter. It must be process B. Look at the backlog in front of process B. We can double our speed if we make them go twice as fast. Well, they're taking 45 seconds. Your problem is the waits in between the stages. It probably isn't any one of these three stations' fault that we're going slow, that it's taking a long time. The 14 days isn't because of any of the stations involved. So I want you to think about this. This is process efficiency. What if, by working together, A, B, and C could turn out one item every, it would be 645 seconds, and that we could ship it the same day? What difference would that make? Well, the problem is in the piling up between them. But let's make it even more fun. Let's say that process C is an approval step, and it can reject a piece. So process C can reject a piece and send it back to the supplier, where it will take 6 days to return to process A. When process A is available, it'll only take them 300 seconds, but then it'll stack up for another 4 days, waiting for B, who gets in 45 seconds, and stacks up for yet another day. So now we've added 11 days to the process by sending things backward once. What if this process has multiple backward loops? How do you predict how long it'll take to get a thing done? Well, you can't. It's unpredictable. Things may be rejected, and they may be rejected to an earlier stage where they have to queue up and wait. This is typically what happens in a normal organization, and this is where most of our inefficiencies come from. And I'm telling you this because this does tie into swarming and mobbing and pairing, about pulling people together. So in my case, I have a developer. Work is in front of the developer. There's a buffer. You probably have a small backlog of things that you'd like to get done today or tomorrow or Monday or Wednesday. And that's fine. And then you start working on it, and you realize that you're going to need to run it through one of the specialists, the UI, the database, the UX, the architect, whoever. So sure, you pop it into their queue, and the specialists, whichever specialists are involved, they each have a queue of things they're trying to get done. Eventually they get done and they send it back to you, the developer. It's going to wait in your queue because you've had to pick up other work while you sent that one out for work on it, right? You have to have a new ticket. What do you do when you're waiting? You pull another ticket, right? Okay, so you send it off to the specialist, you pull another ticket. When your ticket is done, you'll pick up the old ticket again, and you'll start working on it. And that's fine until you realize that you actually need to send it to a tester who's a different person in a different place. Well, the tester has a queue. It takes a little bit of time for them to get around to your work. And they take a look at it, start running the tests, and then they find that there's a problem with it. They send it back to you. By the way, in the meantime, you've pulled a new ticket. Right? Sure you have. You're a diligent worker. Okay, so you pulled a new ticket, so when that one's done and you pass it on to somebody else, you pick up the one that came back from test. Cool. So this should be done, pretty quickly. We turn it around in a couple of hours, no big deal, send it back out. But we have a pull request. In order to get it into main, it has to be approved by somebody. You see how this is going? Okay, so we send it to the approver. They take the pull request. They take a look at the merge. They do their due diligence. They find out that you used a method that you shouldn't use because it's been deprecated, and they're going to send it back to you. So it goes back to you. And of course, in the meantime, you've pulled another ticket because you're a diligent worker. So it's going to have to wait until you're available, and then you'll take a look at it and do the work, and then you'll have to send it back through test again, who might refuse it, and you can send it to the approver who might refuse it. This system doesn't work if things return very often, and managers complain that our teams have no predictability with a structure like this. This is not predictable. Things are always late. You guys need to work faster. How much would it help for the developer to work faster? Yeah, almost none at all. We've done value stream maps on organizations and found that if the developers were going twice as fast, it would make a 1% difference because the programmers were only taking 2% of the total time. Interesting thought. Well, why? Well, it's because we're scattered out and everybody's working individually, and when you have an individual specialist, you have a buffer. You have a queue of work, and things have to wait in queues. And also, we find that WIP is high. We run up the work in progress because whenever I pass something off, I have to pull a new ticket. Otherwise, I'm idle, and nobody likes an idle programmer, right? So I may have 3, 5, 6 things in a row, all in progress somewhere, not really in progress because I'm not working on it. Somebody's working on it, or it's sitting in a pile, right? And I've been in organizations that had 15 to 20 tickets in progress per developer at any given point in time. This is dreadfully inefficient. Okay, well that's the bad stuff, Tim. What's the good stuff? Well, bear with me just a second more, because that's really the trick about this is new work comes in, release candidates come out. We want it to be good. We want it to be efficient. We want the shortest time from one to the other. What is our expected duration? And most people have no idea. But they're just convinced that if this guy would work twice as fast, it would take care of everything. Or maybe we need more specialists. If I could double the number of specialists, how much would that make us go through faster? Maybe we need more approval levels. Well, no, that's not going to help either. So what does help is putting people together. in teams, right? Now, there's a whole bunch of different styles to this, but think about it this way. You have an atomic team, which means that we assign work to the team, not to the people in it, right? If we start by being atomic, then self-organizing can come later. As long as we're pushing work to individual developers, they have no opportunity to self-organize unless they do it in a very sneaky way, which they sometimes do. We get tickets. People typically would go through and assign each of the developers their own ticket or set of tickets. Well, one of those must be really good, getting 4 tickets. User stories and defects, and they assign them to individuals. And they say, here's a team. This is a team of people, right? Well, what makes them a team? Okay, remember early on I said, what makes it a one-man job? Well, the boss assigned it to one person. So what makes this a team? The boss said so. Are they working together? Are they sharing the load? Are they training each other? Are they teaching each other? Are they growing each other's skills? How does the person in the green, have they contributed to the success of the person in the blue? Well, they haven't. They're all supposed to do their own work, which is the opposite of being a team. It's a conceit on an org chart, doesn't mean a thing. So no, probably not a team. And this is a classic tell. If you look up and there's a board, a Kanban board or a Scrum job board or whatever the board is, and the swim lanes going from left to right have people's names on them, you don't have a team. In fact, this is a leaderboard. This isn't a teamwork board. This doesn't encourage teamwork. This actually puts people in competition. You're going to be watching to see who gets the most work done, who's the most efficient. What you've done is create a competition between the team members because the one who's furthest behind is going to look bad. It's a pillory board. It's there to shame people into working faster, which, by the way, working faster usually isn't anything to do with motivation at first. But if you keep it up there long enough, it'll become a motivational problem. You can make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's not a team at all. So we can go to pair programming. So we have a big backlog of work for the team, and people are working in pairs. So this group of people takes story 4055, they take 5366, they take 7013. Well, what about the rest of these stories that are in the backlog? How can we get them started? Don't. Your efficiency is about getting things done, not about getting things started. Having 1,000 things in progress does not make you more efficient. But having 12 things done is better than having nothing done and 1,000 things in progress. So this is a pretty good way of working. People do this. There are some problems with it. Right? What are the odds that these 3 groups of people are going to complete at the same time so that they can reform their teams? Right? Well, if we can't reform our teams, we're going to be working in the same pairs. It's going to be like a marriage, right? We're going to be stuck together for weeks. And we'll get something done, and then we have to work on the next one together. Well, why can't I work with somebody else? Well, because they're working on something else they're not done yet. So we take a new story, we're a day in, the other people finish their story. Well, now I can't switch because we were already on the new story. Well, I guess we'll just stick it with it for one more story, and maybe we'll accidentally finish at the same time, right? It's not a very good system. Also, who's going to say that these people don't have, maybe the people working on 5366 need someone who's really good with JavaScript, but their best JavaScript person is working on 7013. Well, I can't go break up a pair. They're in the middle of a story. I'll wait. Also not very efficient. Waiting is the bad thing. So it's a difficult thing to do. Stories will get finished, though. But what you've really got going on are 3 teams for the duration. Now, you can swap teammates for the next period, iteration, sprint, whatever. But you're kind of stuck there, which is not that bad, but it's not a team. It is 3 teams.
Just a point over here. People also say that, what about switching pairs on everyday basis? So,
Yeah.
so people who is working on 4055, they will switch pairs to other person the next day. So just
Yeah, we've taken it upon ourselves to do it artificially. So what we do is we decide that every time you eat a meal, you have to switch a partner. And that way we get more eyes on it rather than just being the same pairs all the time. But a lot of organizations I'm finding are keeping the same pairs for an entire sprint. And I think it's a huge mistake. They're also not taking breaks, which I think is a bigger mistake. You should take a break every hour for at least 5 or 10 minutes. I think 7 to 10 minutes is about perfect. Get up, move around so that you're not just sitting in each other's space the whole time. It's good to break up, go separate ways, grab something to eat, have a drink. But whatever it is, switching partners I think is good. We have to do it artificially if we want to keep it moving. And I think that's an important way to do it. And of course, you can find most of the things you want to know about pair programming in Pair Programming Illuminated. And it's a wonderful book, Williams and Kessler. Laurie Williams has done pretty much all the studying of pair programming for decades. If you want to find something, look under Laurie Williams, search her online. Task switching, it's kind of funny. Task switching does have a cost, right? So when somebody goes from one team to another, they're leaving one context and joining another context. And there is a certain inefficiency in that, and I'm willing to call that out as being true. But also, when the person joins, they're freshly encountering what the other team was thinking, and it's their opportunity to change the thinking of that team, to recognize flaws in that system. So usually it pays back through the diversity of approaches. And I've seen a pair of people work on something really hard, and another person walk up and go, oh, this algorithm is a well-known algorithm. It's so-and-so's algorithm. All we have to do is just implement that. And the other team had been inventing the algorithm from scratch for a day, right? So the little things that different knowledge does pay off, and sometimes it is more efficient. Individual task switching, though, the nice thing about this is you have one person stay behind and provide continuity, while another person comes in and provides critique and new knowledge. So it's a fresh thing to do when you switch during. Okay, there's another way to go about this. Let's do another one. So here's a team, and we assign them all 40-55. Cool. And then what happens? Well, they work on 40-55 until it's done. But when it's done, it's really done. And everybody agrees that it's done. And it's to standard of everybody. And it is to the satisfaction of everybody. And then they push it on. This is mob programming. A lot of companies do mob programming all day, every day. They find that their efficiency goes up considerably. They get more things really done sooner. Is it faster than if they divided the work? They have no way of knowing. But they know that they release 10 times more often. The fact is, they are at a point of completion much more often, and at a point of completion, you can push the work on, as opposed to having 1,000 things in flight and nothing done. So it is a rather efficient way of working. And if you want to learn more about that, you would read the mob programming book by Woody and Kevin. And of course, Woody Zuhl is the primary proponent of mob programming, and a few other pretty cool ideas that you might find interesting. So people are like, well, there's children on the cover. Is this a children's book? It's like, well, no, but Woody's wife is an illustrator who writes children's books. And, why would he not have his wife illustrate his book, right? And they're actually quirky and fun illustrations, and I think you'll enjoy them. Don't feel like it's a children's book just because it has children on the cover. Well, there's another way of working, right? Because with pairs, why do we know it's a two-person job? Well, it's a two-person job because we're pairing. With a mob programming, how do we know this job is big enough for the whole team? Well, because the whole team is doing it. Well, is that really how you decide these things? Have you ever been in a pair where it's like, well, 2 people isn't enough, or 2 people are too many? Have you ever been in a mob where it feels like, wow, we shouldn't all 5 be sitting here right now? Or 8, or 9. Okay, well, what's another way of working? Now we're getting here. So, I got a bigger group of people, right? I have seen teams with 40 members or more. Like, well, you can't have that. Scrum says that we need to be 7 plus or minus 2, small enough to be nimble, large enough to have the skills we need. Yeah. Okay, but I want you to think this is different. This isn't a normal team. This is a talent pool. These are people who have all worked with each other now for some time, probably, or they're just starting to work with each other a lot. Okay, we've got a backlog of work. It's still an atomic team. We don't say who does what. Instead, we post these jobs up and we say, hey, we need to get these things done. And people want to be busy. Most programmers are very conscientious. The testers, UI people, most people who work in software are crazy conscientious people, just amazingly conscientious. They always want to be busy. They always want to be doing something worth their talents. They always want to be learning and growing. So it's not really like some jobs where you only do it because you get paid. Most people in software are motivated. By the way, if you grind people under heel long enough, they'll lose their motivation. And they'll just show up and do whatever you tell them to do so they can go home. But most people wanted to do this stuff. So here's how this one works. It's a little bit different. Here's the first story, 4055. What do we need to do that? Well, I take a look at that's a hard one. It's got UX and database and new algorithms and all kinds of stuff. It's going to take a lot of testing. So 4 people jump out, I'll work on that, and they take a look, oh, that's probably enough of us, right? Cool. Let's pick the next story then. If that's enough for that story, what's in 7013? Well, it's a really hard one. It's going to take a lot of specialty too. A lot of information. There's just a lot of work to be done, so we get more testers, more programmers. 7013 is going to take 5 people to get it done. Okay, we have this other one. It's a little defect, 5366. Okay, the 2 of us will do it. This is a 2-person sized job. If it's not, we'll bring more people in or take people out. Whatever's needed, right? We will right size the team for the job. Well, no, there's 8922. There's only 3 of us left. Okay, we'll take that one. Now you notice you're still one team. It's a bigger team, but you're not having to manage the team to individuals. You're not having to chase people down individually. There's no queue. Right? The people you need to do the job are working with you on the job as it goes. Also, the boundaries aren't fixed. People can switch between jobs if it's more efficient than staying where they are. And that's when your talent is being underused where you are. You may not need a UX person all the time, but you might need them a couple times. So they may float between teams as needed. So, DE 2122 needs to be expedited. It's a hot fix. It's really important. There's a deadline looming. People are upset, or there's a trade show. So notice what we did is we pulled one person out of 7013. Someone volunteered, and someone volunteered from 8922, and boom, that story's going on. But notice that none of the other stories are paused. It didn't stop any of the work. It's not adding weights. It may take a little bit longer for some of these other stories to finish, but this one will be expedited completely, and then the other stories will be picked up again. So you can peel out for special instances. All right. Okay, so let's go. This team finished their old story, 4055. You start picking up 2122. I don't know if that needs all of us or not, but we can pick up the next one and start moving on. Hey, we finished. We should celebrate first. So you hear people clapping and tearing up a card, or there's a post in Slack now that we can't be physically together. So we're celebrating that that's done. That's a good thing. The next story, though, the next number, not that big of a deal. I'll just take that one alone. Well, what happened to my teammates? Well, they all went and joined other teams that needed help. Right? So when you finish, you're not really looking for a boundary in order to reform your teams. You can reform your teams as needed, right? So then we come take another look at this. Something else is going to happen. There's a big meeting tomorrow, and it's important that we have representatives, enough people from the team to help understand the problem and propose solutions and work out priorities, and maybe a first draft design of what the result would look like. Oh my gosh, it's going to stop all work. No, it's not. Work may slow down a little bit, but you can send your delegates to the really important meeting and continue working. and you will have a number of people who have the answer. It's a good thing, right? Well, that's really nice. Okay, well, what about coming back in? Well, when they come back in, they can join where they want to join, or where they need to join, or where they were before. The work continued. They've come back and rejoined it in progress. They now have fresh eyes to look at what's been done in their absence. It's all a good thing. Oh, a couple of our people got sick. They tested positive. They have to quarantine, whatever the case is, right? What happens when you have a sick day? Nothing really. The work continues because you can. Now notice there's a risk here. What if it had been 4172's sick day? And somebody would have been having to figure out, do I pick up his ticket and continue it, try to figure out what was going on? Do I start fresh, or do we pause the ticket until, well, that's a decision a team can make, right? But you know who's working on what, you're good. So tickets finish, teams reform, unform, reshape. Sometimes things get finished. You get the celebration, they move on to the next thing. You get enough people celebrating, you got a whole bunch of people that can reform as needed to make new things happen, right? And of course, it's all permeable boundaries because the work isn't assigned to those individuals. They have picked the work up as volunteers. So it's quite easy for people to move in a mob. Now, these are what? Are these one team? Not sort of, yes, no. Is it one team when you're swarming? Well, you have permeable boundaries around temporary subteams. It's like, wow, that's not what the Scrum guide says. It says not to have subteams and separate titles and things within the group. It's all just one group, right? Well, yeah. Yeah, okay, fine. Do all of these people have common goals and outcomes? Do they all contribute to the success of the project and of each other? Yeah, in steps. Not always with everybody constantly, but always with somebody constantly. Always with the goals of the organization and the software project, initiative, whatever they're working on. And it works. And these are all with permeable boundaries. So maybe it is a team, but it's a different kind of team than we've seen before, right? Now, there are some things that could go wrong. What if blue and green down here never, ever, ever split up? They always work together in everything. I don't know. Is it good? Is it bad? Are we concerned? What if green, she does all the real work and blue just likes to be in the same team? Well, is green okay with that? Why are they always together? It's odd that they don't split up, but is it okay? It might be okay. It's not necessarily true that one of them does all the work and the other one's loafing, because all the work gets done. And it gets done to standard, with quality, and in a reasonable time. And it's really robust that if one of them is missing, the other one continues working. I don't know that it's a problem if you have people who tend to stick together. I kind of wonder why. It's a friendship. Maybe it's, they're two senior people who respect each other, then we still may want to sometimes move one of the senior people to another group temporarily, but we could talk to them about it if we notice. But the odds are we wouldn't even notice because things are just getting done well. And maybe if things are getting done well and quickly, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't worry about it too much. But that's one of the things. Now, there are other problems. It's like, well, wait. If you have a team of 40 people, how many managers do you have for that team? I mean, does that mean that we need to empty out our manager ranks? Do we need to stop promoting people into management? Are managers unnecessary? No, none of that happens at all. Actually, you still have a large number of people 40 people. Do you want to do the annual review for 40 or 50 people? Most people don't want to do that, right? So you're likely going to have people who are managing the work separate from those who are responsible for the individuals, raises and advances and financial and career kinds of things. So you probably won't empty the ranks of leaders and managers, but you probably don't need as many people with their hands in the backlog as you would otherwise. You will find different ways to lead and different ways to manage. And that's fine. And there will still be some conflicts. I mean, what if this blue person and this blue person hate each other? Well, you can avoid that a long time, but probably somebody's going to have to come in and mediate and work that through to where they have a working arrangement that they can work in the same place, even in the same group, and not turn into anarchy and chaos and violence, right? We don't have to be undercutting each other. So this is basically how swarming works. It's a different way of working. It has some interesting problems for conventional organizations, right? And a conventional organization is going to say, well, I need to know what each person did so that I can put it into the annual review and maintain that. And it's like, well, you can't, because everybody worked on almost everything. You can't separate the work of individuals from the work of the collective. It doesn't, there's no good way to do that. Well, can we do it by watching their commit records? No, because if this red person committed 50 times, it was this team of people who committed. And it's not the same team that it was on the first commit and the third commit, right? It could have been any number of people. So you can't go by who committed or who commits the most often, or if you have a story, well, the 15 stories got done. That was more than usual. Who's responsible for the boost in productivity? There's no way of knowing. You can't say who. You can say, what have we done differently? And it's like, okay, well, what happens when we want to fire 3 people to reduce salaries? Well, hopefully your managers who are involved with people will understand who needs to leave or wants to leave, right? And if you want to get really radical, you go to the team and you say, hey, listen, we've got a tight spot. We're going to have to eliminate 3 positions. And I've actually seen teams talk through where one of them said, you know what, I've got an offer on the table anyway, and I was kind of thinking about taking it, so I'll duck out. And then another person's like, well, I never really needed this job. You guys, I'll leave so you guys can keep working. And then the other person, it's like 5 of the team members are like, could it be this person? Because this person is very difficult to work with and slows us down a lot. So, you can vote people off the island sometimes. Now, that's more radical and mature of a conversation than many organizations are prepared to have. And it's not perfect, right? It could be bias. It could be that the team has a shared bias against certain types of people. So that may not be perfect either. Usually, though, it's voluntary. People will fire themselves rather than have their colleagues get fired if they can afford to be without the job better. You don't have to do that to swarm, but it does make that an interesting problem. And again, most managers know their teammates. And most managers know right now, if I had to let 5 people go, it'd be these 5. Or, if I was going to promote somebody, it would be this person, right? Most people already know that. But again, that's imperfect. That could be prone to bias as well. No perfect way, but swarms certainly seem to be an efficient way to get the work done. But those are the problems. Number 1, who's in charge here when you're swarming? I needed to talk to the person in charge. Well, we don't have that. Not really. Talk to the people who are doing the work. Well, here, this ticket hasn't been picked up yet. I want to talk to the person in charge. I need this ticket picked up. Talk to the teams. Maybe you do have a manager or a PO who understands the priority, can manage that. Who does the annual reviews? Whoever. People are involved with the workers and hear them and know what they're about. You can't ignore people for a year and then do an annual review in this structure. You gotta know, right? Hey, you know what? If it's everybody's job, it's nobody's job. I know how this works. If we say, hey, somebody's got to fix the network, everybody else keeps doing the work, the network never gets fixed. Well, that's not how this works, right? This works, we have posted jobs, and as we complete a thing, we pick up another thing. That's what we do. So it's not that we said, hey, everybody do all this work and now go off on your own. If you were working solo, then work that isn't clearly assigned is not going to be done. But if you're not working solo, then the work is given to the team and the team picks it up. We've never had something fall through the cracks with swarming. But we've had it happen plenty where people have individual assignments. So it's a problem that doesn't seem to actually exist. And so what happens when work falls between the cracks? We don't know. We've never seen it happen. I don't know what else to tell you. There's no guarantee. It's just true. How can we tell the good programmers from the bad programmers? Why did you hire bad programmers? Did you intentionally go out and hire people who weren't any good? I thought everybody that you hired worked really hard to get into your company. They did interviews, they did programming tests, they sat with the testers, they had to provide a resume, they had to prove their credentials. Why did you hire bad ones? Well, we don't hire bad people, we only hire good people, but you know, some of them are better than others. Okay. All the work is getting done well. Nobody's complaining about freeloaders. Why do you want to know? What's the purpose of this? Well, what if we want to promote we want to give somebody a raise for doing a great job? Well, everybody's worked with everybody. Ask them who deserves a raise. Or who needs a raise the most. Maybe, you know, hey, I've got a raise. Here's the bump in money we're going to talk about. Who gets it? I've seen a team say, well, you know what? We think that Marcia is dreadfully underpaid for the work she does. Why don't you give it to Marcia? Bring her up to parity with the rest of us. That actually happens. I know it sounds too idealistic to be true, but you know, it happens when you work with these people every day. You develop relationships and you care about them, and you may make better recommendations to retain Marcia so she doesn't have to quit to get a better job to keep the team running. Right? Does this mean managers are unnecessary? No, it doesn't. Not at all. But the way that people used to manage won't be the way that management happens in this form. Sounds crazy. Except for the fact that it works really well. If, you know, the organization is ready for it. And that's the other thing is, you know, what if you can't do swarming? What if the organization won't allow it? Well, then you don't do it. Don't get fired because you went to a webinar, right? Just stay in there, work hard, do a good job, do the best you can. If you know this is out there and you really want to do it and you can't, then you might keep an eye open for people, you know, places where you could do it. You might look for opportunities to recommend it, maybe on a pilot project or something, to see if it works for your company. You know, look for an opportunity. If you want to do it, eventually you'll find a way. Just watch for the opportunities. But if your company won't let you, then you know, decide, I like my company. I'll stay here and not swarm, at least for now. And that's good enough. Keep your job, pay your bills, take care of your family. It's a good thing. It's all very noble. And then people say, but you know, it's hard, right? I mean, I'm used to to going in, I kind of liked it. You go in, you log into your computer, you pull a ticket, you do a ticket, you do a pull request, you might have to fix things up, pass through QA, it gets merged. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be a baker. I don't want to deal with bakers and bankers and hoteliers and sports stores. I just want to sit here and do my blacksmith work. Right? I just want to specialize and just do my little thing and not involve other people in it. Okay. I think there's plenty of places that will continue working that way for quite a long time. You can probably make a career pull a ticket, implement a ticket, send it on. You can do that for a long time. Swarming doesn't mean you have to swarm. There's not a moral imperative that you work this way. But there are people doing it, and it's worked pretty well for them, and the efficiency is surprisingly high. But it is hard. So I wanted to say, if you try and you can't quite get there, whatever it is you're working on, new languages, new stack, new team, new software, old software, whatever it is, don't confuse frustration with failure, right? It may be hard to get to the place you want to be, but you didn't fail. You just haven't got there yet. And to remind you of that, I've left up the Yet Yeti on my screen. I believe there are some questions. Is that true?
Yes, there are some questions. But actually, before that, I just want to add a couple of things. So, first of all, it was a great pleasure to have this session, and basically, I did some write-up on the collaborative daily Scrum sometimes back, and surprisingly, it is completely aligned to what I had to say over there actually, because it was completely all about like replanning every day. So you come on the board and then see like what, based on the sprint planning and sprint backlog items, how much time is, or how many people needs to be there for that particular ticket, and you start working in that way. Next day you come back and then you see you have finished the work, then where you want to get involved actually in the existing ticket so that it remains low. And then in case you are not required, then maybe pick up new tickets actually. So it was completely aligned towards that way of working. And it was quite surprising how seamlessly somehow we touch-based each other on that day. Yeah. So with that, actually, I'll take some.
Oh, can I show you one more thing? Because I think that I've done a disservice because I haven't shown this.
Yeah.
So let me throw this over here. This was a thing that we were calling a boss board. Oh, it just vanished. I hate it when that happens. I know why it vanished, because I was full screen. Hold on just a second. Window, that one, and then window, bring to front. Oh, bring to, here we go. This is an example of one that we made. And I really should have just included this. I apologize for not having thought earlier. What we did is we set up in Mural, and I'm going to hide a couple details. But we brought up this tool. What we did is we made a vertical column for each task that we're running. Now, they didn't have ticket numbers. They had names for them, right? And we had different breakout rooms in Microsoft Teams, different rooms that they could go to.
Yep.
So room 1 was team 1. They would put this thing up. It says, we're working on efficiency in the query. And then his is people who would sign up. These are actual names of actual developers. And they drug their name over into this column and joined that team. And then this one was building a sidebar. And May was a UX expert, and so was Georgia. So it's kind of cool. There's some core data structures that had to change. But you see what they did is, these are all, you can edit those and move them around. They could drag their names around as they like. And this is how they formed and reformed teams, and how they kept track of what was in progress and who was working on it. Okay, I wanted to make sure I showed you that. I'm calling this a swarm lanes board now. We used to call it a boss board. It wasn't a very good name. But we're calling it swarm lanes, and it helps us to work in swarms.
Cool.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think this can be done on the Scrum board at the same time, because you just assign the number of people over there, who all people are going to join that particular ticket, and then start working on that way.
We did that with physical boards in 2004, where we would clip our names to the ticket on the board.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people started using Jira, and Jira allows you only one person.
Jira
which
doesn't
is
allow.
terrible. But yeah, if your board lets you put multiple people on something, then that's a great way to do it too.
Absolutely.
If not, you can use Miro, Mural, whatever, and attach.
And I think Trello is also good actually. It
Yes.
allows, yeah. So with that, actually, I'll just take some questions. First question is, we also talk about slicing stories into the smaller pieces, in which case maybe not more than one or two persons required to complete the work. So basically, I think this is what is trying to say is that before we start looking at how the whole mob or a swarm can start working on a ticket, shouldn't we look at the slicing the stories first?
You can. Sometimes when you do things like story mapping or example mapping, you use role action context, whatever technique you have, a lot of times what you do is you discover different things to be done. You find some things are not necessary, some things are more necessary. So I would say that those kinds of explorations are good to try to discover what the work is. There's no reason why you have to even run a swarm off of tickets. You actually can, and you notice we ran ours on this swarm board over problems to be solved, not tickets to be implemented, right? So, but you certainly could, and I think there's a lot of good reasons to do story mapping and example mapping and role action context pivots.
Yeah, but I think we can slice it anyways. That is the first step to do anyways. But eventually, sometimes the stories could not be broken further actually, and they are big anyways. So at the point of time, you may find out that you may require more people. So let it be there.
Yeah, permeable boundaries mean you could bring more people in, and also it means you can carve pieces off. So you may decide, oh, well, we'll get together to try to understand this, and then we realize we can break it into 3 pieces once we're into it. And we couldn't have seen that in advance.
Absolutely.
Evolutionary design is a different thing, by the way. And just to call that out, sometimes we can't break things down in advance because we just don't know enough. But when we go with evolutionary design, we start to work a walking skeleton way of working. Then pretty quickly we understand how we can then broaden the functionality of the system a little at a time. And in fact, that's what this people did. They had a job they did not understand. It was big, and they did approach it that way. So
cool. So the next one is, I mean, just want somebody want to make sure, Sunil wants to make sure that swarming is done for the short-term project, or it is done for the longer-term projects as well.
I've seen it in both. Long-term projects, I've seen people doing, multi-year projects with 40, 50 people. So big organizations doing big work with swarming, and it worked very well for them. I don't know why I'd want to limit it to small things, but there's no reason I couldn't do it with small teams or small jobs or short periods. I think if I was in a real hurry, then efficiency would be more important to me. Yes. So if I have to get something done by Christmas, it's, that's less than a month away. Then I would probably want to have swarming for that, just because there's not time to do it in any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, it reduces a lot of wait time and handoffs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
By the way, some companies don't need to be efficient at all. They have enough money, enough backlog, enough of a customer base that if they were 5% efficient, that would be plenty, and they could stay in business for another 40 years. But there are organizations that need to be efficient, and I think that, if you're in a big enough company with enough money, you all get to work the way you want. You don't have to worry about this kind of stuff.
Yep. So the next one is, this one is from Ravi. He says that due to microservice architecture, my team is saying swarming is not possible. Each service change, one story has to be done by one member only. Any suggestions?
Well, it's not a moral imperative that you swarm. You certainly could work in small, stable teams, and that's got a long history too. If it's not possible, then it's not possible, but I would take a look at the assumptions behind that. Is it really, are the microservices so big that really going from one microservice to the next would absolutely stymie people? Maybe they're not microservices. It's an interesting question, and maybe people are so specialized that the idea of switching across team boundaries is terrifying.
Absolutely.
Treat it the way you do other scary things. Approach them carefully and slowly, and take notes, and make sure that you don't sacrifice people to big scary monsters.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a good point to look at, like why this is really happening is that there is separate cost to that. Because of that, some specialization is required to be done on services.
I will toss this in though. If you're dealing with something and to complete a feature is going to require 3 or 4 microservices and a different front end, then having some people from each of the microservices come together with the person who understands, the business flow in the front end, that temporary team has specialists from the different microservices, and they know how to build this thing correctly. And to at least bring them together, once or twice a day would be a really good idea, just to get that initiative out of the way. So you may be in a microservice, but I'm betting that there are people who use your microservice, and I bet you use other services. And if that's so, then you might want to sometimes form up a temporary swarm with the people who represent all the pieces affected by a story to keep from having disconnects.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So,
yep. So sorry.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So like microservices, the front end doesn't change. The image or the UI which the end customer is seeing or the end person is seeing doesn't change. Only the back end, the database or the application, what we are integrating and trying to change from monolith microservices change. So the end goal is common for a particular project we are planning to get it along to the end customer or end service. So I think this would definitely help, but we have to refine ourselves and see how can we put it together as what Tim explained, so that because like Tim explained a great concept. So it depends upon the project, how I'm delivering, how I'm driving it, and how people are, say one guy is using Go and they're using Java and they're developing, but end goal is same. The front end user interface is same. The loyalty is same. So I think there we need to refine a little bit and that. Thanks for your time. Yeah.
Definitely having some way to actually have the people collaborate wherever an interface exists is, I think, a wise and prudent move.
Sure. So the next question is actually I'm taking it from the coordination standpoint on the swarms. So, I'm just taking 2 questions which are grouped together. So one is with swarms coordination with other subteams could become an overhead. Thoughts about it? And another one is with such a large team, 40 people, the context increases considerably. How would team members know what is happening in other teams and help others?
So, I showed you the swarm board, right, where people can see what other people are working on. Of course, the fact that you're moving across boundaries means you'll take some knowledge with you and join with people who have other knowledge. So, is there some overhead to that? Yeah, there probably is, but what you're doing is you're trading off to get more robustness and to get better answers. So it seems to be better than a wash. I think it still comes out advantageous. You may not know what everybody's done. And of course, the context is big because we have 40 people and we're doing the work of 40 people, right? So everything is changing. It's sort of like everything else in the world, you're inside one company, but all of the companies that build all of the components that you use are different companies. And every once in a while you might get snagged because somebody upgraded, maybe going from one version of Angular to another. It's a problem, or going from one version of Go or Python to the next. You might have accidentally been using a keyword as a variable name, So you will occasionally hit some snag, but when you do, you should be with someone who was part of that. Right? If you keep changing your team composition, if it's permeable, then the odds are that the 5 people working on your new story, one of them had something to do with the other story that's affecting you at some point in the past. Or If you don't really know, then you swap some of your people around. It's like, hey, I don't know how this piece works. Who knows how this works? And then somebody comes and joins your team from another team. And that usually works out. Somebody in your team knows. You got 40 people, and they can leave their team and join your team for an hour or two or a day, right? So that tends to be how we resolve things. There's a robustness to it that's pretty powerful. You're never stuck with the team you're in and just the knowledge you have. You can pull on the rest of the organization that way.
Yep. So this is around, it looks like a little bit towards the multi-team swarming, but I'm just, maybe I'm not writing in the right way, but maybe lead to over there as well. So in case of multiple Scrum teams working on different modules, can we achieve swarming? Or I think in case we can also take it another way as well, like if we can extend it to multi-team swarming as well.
And I think that's a really fair question. So what I've actually witnessed is it started when you had multiple teams inside the same code base, right? And they started realizing that artificially dividing themselves into teams to keep a certain team size was slowing them down. So they started within a component to start mobbing and swarming. And they found out that if they did that, they all liked working together and they enjoyed that. And then you had a team that was working on one component and another component, and they found that they were interfacing a lot. So they decided to expand the swarming pool to include both sets. And now some people from here did move over and start working on the other components. Some people from here did move over to the other, but for the most part, people stayed with their components because that's where their expertise was. But then they shared across the boundary, and they would form up across the boundary. So suddenly the UI and the back end weren't at odds. They were now coordinating on a daily basis. And then, of course, the next component comes along, and it's like, well, now we're integrating stuff, and you guys need to follow the interface standard. And it's like, well, why don't you just swarm with us while we work on your piece? Next thing you know, it's growing like an amoeba. It's just like absorbing all of the other things around it, and it kept growing up, and it got to 40 some odd people. This was a large organization, and I think they had, the one I'm thinking about right now, that they had 2 or 3 big swarm pools, and they were around different products entirely. And sometimes they would swarm together in small groups of 3 or 4 to get across UI to a different application boundary. So yeah, you get cross swarming, and you can swarm within a component. It usually starts within a component, and then it spreads across an interface boundary. That's harder to say than I thought.
Yeah, makes sense. So I'm just taking it as a last question for now. This is around the data itself. So, I mean, how do we measure efficiency improvement by swarming?
So the way to measure is by throughput accounting, right? So what you would need is to know, right now, know how long does it take from the time that a story is created until it's deployed live, right? And then how many in a period. So what you want to do is you want to see how much work goes into a development team and comes out to deployment in a given period. I think you'll find with swarming, you get more things really done per unit of time. And the main reason is because you don't have those loops that fold back, right? Work never goes backward. It only ever goes forward, which means that, if we spend 2 days on it and then it gets deployed, it may have been that earlier it would have been only one programmer, so it would have taken 3 days, and it would have been rejected twice, so it would have taken 3 weeks. And now you're seeing that, with 5 people on the job, it's actually deployable in 2 days. So you watch that. You watch the throughput. And the throughput will be the actual measure. No matter what you do, the lean people had that part right. It's always about the throughput, not individual throughput, not the cycle time for one station. But if you look at the organization, from the time that you take in a new piece of work to be done, right, until it's actually live and hot, in production, you'll find that the swarming tends to be considerably more efficient. And again, that's partly because we've been starving out our jobs by giving them too few brains. And then to compensate for not having enough brains per task, we've been putting approval loops and specializations in, which actually made our throughput worse. And, give it a shot. And if it doesn't, then don't do it. If it doesn't show markable, people will take a little bit of time to get used to working this way. So you don't confuse impatience with failure, right? Give it the time, get working that way. And if it never does actually show that increase, then don't do it. You don't have to. Nobody ever said you had to swarm. Nobody has to do that. But if it gives you the productivity improvement, the way it has us and the groups we worked with, then I think you'll be pretty addicted to getting things done.
Sometimes I've seen that people, coming from the traditional background, or maybe it's a part of the culture actually, or trait, that they reject the idea itself outrightly. So without even experimenting it for 2 hours a day for 7 days, that's all. So,
well, that's a human thing, right? They say that human beings don't actually fear change; they fear loss, right? And so you're gonna see something new coming up, and you're gonna think, well, why should I do this new thing? I've got habits, I've got a routine, I've got a pattern I like. I don't have to worry about my process. I just do my work. And then this new thing comes up, and it's like, well, that can't be efficient. What I'm doing is the best I've ever done. So this is efficient. That's not going to be the same as what I do that's efficient for me now. Therefore, it's an inefficient thing. I want to reject that. I'm going to lose something, right? My habit, my certainty, my solitude, whatever it is, people are going to fear losing something.
Or my perception of the productivity itself.
Yeah. And most of us tie productivity around what we really like anyway. Most people don't have any measures for their productivity. If we did, I'm telling you, we wouldn't have the software systems we have where 90% of the rules are to prevent you from releasing software. Right? If we were actually about efficiency, we would know our throughput and we would know why we don't get higher throughput, and we would be fixing that. Whereas most people are just going to run on autopilot unless they're in a situation where it's a do or die. And if they don't become efficient, they're going to lose their business. And then they're ready to change. That's okay too. I'm not here to convince anybody they have to do this. And if your organization isn't ready or doesn't have to be this kind of efficiency, or you're full of conflicts, and trying to put everybody together and have them team up is going to be, just the world's worst nightmare. If you have an even mix of, fascists and socialists, and they just can't get along, then, maybe you might want to look at some other ways of working. But typically, it seems to work pretty well for those who do it. And if you can't, don't.
Yeah, and actually, just want to add one point over here, as you rightly mentioned before as well. It is also not about the individual productivity anymore. It is the problem where the delays which are there among the different individuals actually. So even if you improve the individual productivity, or you have the perception about it, that also doesn't help anymore.
Yeah, there are the other piece of that, by the way, and it's probably not polite to talk about it, is role success, right? So role success is all about how well you will be seen doing in your job, leading to promotion and raises. And a lot of people are worried about working this way because they have a career path and they know how to achieve it now, right? And they know how to do better than other people so that they can be the ones who will get the positive attention and the goodies. And some organizations are competitive that way, and they really appreciate the kind of aggressive self-promotion work, and people like to be promoted. And sometimes people are going to look at something like this and it's like, this is going to socialize or democratize everything. How do I become the one everyone depends on when we all depend on each other kind of equally?
Yep.
Where's my ability to stand out and and be better than everybody else. Or, wait, I wanted to be an architect. And an architect is its own position with its own title and its own office. If I do this, then if I become an architect, I'm just one of the people who can do architecture. I don't have a special office. How am I going to show off my office to people? And so role success is hard. And I will tell you, I don't know the answer to that one either. There were people promoted out of swarms because everybody in the swarm knew that these were people who were go-to people who
Absolutely.
kept them focused and did a good job. But it really is much more about how much your peers respect you and enjoy your talents than it is about how well you can schmooze the manager or convince them or promote yourself. It really is more you have good functional and behavioral skills, you're likely to get noticed, and otherwise probably not.
Yep. So I think with that, we are bringing to the end of this session. And I would like to say thank you to Tim for coming again to our sessions. And I think we will be having him back again for another one after a quarter, actually. So thank you so much, Tim, for coming and joining us. Actually.
Thank you again for the invitation, and hope you all have a wonderful day.